So Dannie, it is so nice to have you on SheLeads. I am so excited to just get to know you, learn from you, and just hear your story. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. I love this initiative that you're taking.
Thank you.
So I'm honored to be hosted.
Thanks. So Dannie, you are the Senior Director of Sales at Slack. And most people probably already heard of Slack, but just in case, it is probably one of the fastest growing companies today. And what you guys do is you enable teams to communicate and collaborate effectively. And even given these times with coronavirus, I'm sure it's even more useful. But prior to Slack, you got your bachelor's from UPenn, you went to Stanford Business School, and then you also have experience in management consulting, and you worked at HubSpot for 5 years as director of product. So Dannie, it's so exciting to have you here, and I'm really going to learn a lot, so I'm excited. But just to get started, I want to take you back kind of to when you were my age, 21, 22 years old, coming out of UPenn. Did you know what you wanted to do? And if not, like, how did you navigate your career?
I had zero idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And frankly, I'm okay with that now in hindsight. So anyone who's listening, breathe a sigh of relief and feel rest assured you're going to be fine.
Okay.
I studied psychology undergrad, and that was definitely where my curiosity took me and where a lot of my interests lied. And I thought about actually pursuing that as a career path. Like, what would it look like to become a therapist? And what I realized was, I think that profession benefits from gray hair, metaphorical and literal, and just life wisdom and experience.
Yeah.
And I also needed to make sure that I was able to support myself right away. I didn't want to go straight into getting another degree.
Yeah.
And so then I was thinking about the business world and was thinking, well, that's one where actually my youth may help me. And it would probably be easier to build a career in business first, whatever that means. It's a pretty broad term. And then later in life, over time, if I want to, I could go and start a therapy practice or revisit my passion for psychology. And in fact, waiting a long time would actually help me show up better in that role.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how I navigated it. And I jumped into the business world mostly through trial and error and, taking the job I was hired for.
Yeah. Yeah. And so did you have mentors throughout your career kind of guiding you and telling you, okay, this could be a really valuable experience, or was it kind of just your own outlook?
I now have many mentors, and I've developed kind of a whole roster of mentors.
Yeah.
Some of whom I'm proactive with, and we can talk through it a little bit. But there are some that I check in with regularly and who know that they're playing a mentorship role. And there are others who I just look to in terms of seeing how they navigate very specific circumstances where I think they show up well, and I try to wear that person's kind of hat and mindset when I'm trying to navigate a similar situation. But early days, if I'm in your position, I'm 21, I'm 22. On one hand, I can imagine that you're looking around at your peers and you're trying to make sure that you measure up to whatever they're doing and that you feel like you've gotten the job secured so that you know what's next. But on the other hand, looking back, I would say you should absolutely prioritize fun and adventure right now. Like you have the rest of your life to figure out, how to navigate your career and make sure every step is productive. But you'll never have the freedom that you have in your early 20s. Yeah. So, let's say COVID aside, if there's an opportunity to go abroad and just do something that sounds fun or really intellectually stimulating, do that. Do not worry about getting into the perfect rotational program or, even if you're younger and you're 19, don't worry about getting that perfect internship that's going to lead to the perfect job. There is time. And I definitely just guessed my way through the early years. And you know what? I was able to make up a really intentional sounding story in hindsight where somehow all the pieces of the puzzle came together and I wouldn't have gotten to where I am now without that. But it's not like it was scripted or super intentional along the way. And so,
yeah. And I think that's so valuable too, especially especially people my age, we kind of get in this, or a lot of people, honestly, like regardless of age, you get into this mindset where, okay, I'm going to plan on my life 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And even like, for instance, coronavirus right now, it's kind of taught us that, look, you can plan because it's good to plan, but at the end of the day, things change and you have to kind of be flexible with that and just take it as it comes. And also, like, yeah, having fun at this age, it's a great lesson for me, just because also I think we can learn from every experience we do, regardless of what it is. So like studying abroad or going abroad, I'm sure I'm going to be learning in that experience that I can take to a future job. So I think that's definitely valuable. And I love that.
And it just gets more complicated. Like now, let's say I was craving a 6-month stint in London.
Yeah.
That would mean thinking through my own career. That would mean impacting my husband's career. That would mean thinking about what it means to relocate an 8.5-month-old daughter. So like it gets complicated. Yeah. So I would say in the early days, follow your sense of adventure, and then also, just like you're doing, tap into where your natural curiosity takes you. And let that be your guide, because that's the most telling sense of where you're going to find fulfillment in your career.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so now kind of walk me through. You went to business school, and afterwards you went into management consulting. Did you like that? Was that somewhere, like, what drew you to that and what drew you out of it?
Yeah, so I actually started management consulting right after undergrad.
Okay.
And I went into management consulting because, frankly, it was a very common path for Penn undergrads to move into management consulting. Mm-hmm. And what it represented to me was business boot camp. Since I was a liberal arts major undergrad, I hadn't really deeply gotten an understanding of how businesses operate and grow. And this was a way to get paid while learning that and hopefully provide value to the companies I was consulting. Mm-hmm. And I would say it was very valuable, almost 2 years of my career, but it was not a natural place for me to continue building my career. And like that took a little while for me to figure out. I would say I showed up to work and I wasn't naturally curious about the problems I was solving. I wanted to do a good job and be a really good employee. Mm. But that was like my first inkling that I might not be in the perfect fit role. And what I learned, again, like through trial and error over time, is that I thrive when I am working really closely with other people and when my job is really social in nature and when it's customer facing in nature. So rather than just flexing analytical muscles in my brain and and building models alone in an office, I need to be out there and interacting all the time.
Yeah. So I'm interested, was this kind of a daily realization where you were like, okay, I need to interact with teams? Or like how often should we kind of tap into how we're truly feeling? Because I feel like it's easy to get lost in the daily task and be like, maybe this is just what I'm supposed to be doing right now.
It was not a daily realization. I did feel committed to sticking with the role for 2 years, in part to, number one, learn what I wanted to learn. Number two, follow through with the commitment I made to the company. Yeah. And number three, just, I guess, just have the discipline of doing something that is hard and perhaps unnatural and building a muscle that will serve me well. So it wasn't like on day 5, I thought, this is hard, it might not be a good fit for me. Mm-hmm. I thought, this is hard, it probably means it's worth learning. And I practiced, like I started reading the Wall Street Journal every day. I'd try to open that up for discourse during lunch with people more senior than I to practice speaking intelligibly about what was happening in the business world. Yeah. So it was really valuable, and it wasn't until 1.5 years in that I even considered looking elsewhere. Mm. And once I did, I cast a really wide net. At the time, I didn't have mentors. Like, again, I was not nearly as proactive as you were so early in my career. And I don't know if I would have had the guts. Like, I only gained this once I entered sales. And I realized that people respond to cold emails and cold calls all the time. Yeah. But until I entered sales, I didn't realize that people are happy to just sit down with you and share what they've learned. And in fact, there's probably, there's a psychological gain on my end to feel helpful to the next generation.
No, definitely. So when did you discover sales and something where you were like, okay, this is something I'm passionate about. I'm talking to customers directly. I'm working in teams. So when did you discover that?
So I discovered it through happenstance, but I do want to urge you and anyone who's listening to consider it more proactively. What happened was I stumbled upon HubSpot, which at the time was a teeny tiny company, just above 50 employees, and totally fell in love with the company's culture. Like you could tell just through the blog content that was written what kind of a company it was. And then as soon as I interviewed, I applied to a number of roles, and I remember there were different recruiters internally helping me figure out which role was right. And they're like, well, what are you? Are you sales or are you a consultant, which was what we called customer success? And I was like, I don't know. I just want to work at this company because it feels vibrant and it's exactly what I'm craving right now. And what I learned actually in hindsight afterward with that didn't serve me very well. When a recruiter is talking to a candidate, they want to hear passion for a specific role. So even if you haven't made up your opinion, like that, I am absolutely born to be in sales or I'm born to be in customer success, get yourself excited about one or the other. Maybe, seek mentorship from some folks earlier and develop a point of view, because accidentally I probably came off as a little bit wishy-washy. It was like, HubSpot's my goal. Yeah. Put me where you want. Pay me if you want to. I don't care. I want to work here. And then I ended up in sales because that's where the CEO put me after interviewing with him. And thank goodness I did. I learned that sales is a perfect combination of psychology, which is what I had studied and where my passion was, and strategy. So you are constantly trying to get into the mind of the buyer and think about like what matters to them, like what can I, to a certain extent, assume about like ways that I can be helpful, and then how do I let their guard down and pressure test some of those assumptions so that I figure out whether this is a good use of time. And I would have done that job for free. Like it just felt really good to sell something that I think people need. So if you are considering a role in sales, I would say one litmus test that you could use is, would I think that any family member who is running a company or any good friend who is running a company would be crazy not to use this product? Like, do I just deeply believe in what this product does? And I really want everyone I know and love to use it. If the answer is yes, you're naturally going to be able to sell it with a little bit of coaching. If the answer is no, and it's a little bit commoditized, that may not be the right product for you to sell. Like it's not going to feel as natural.
Yeah. And it's kind of also a test in a sense about the company that you want to go work at, because you were so passionate about HubSpot that you really didn't care what role it is. But I think once you were in sales, you already had that passion for it, that you were going to succeed in selling it. Would you say that's right?
I think that is spot on. And particularly early in your career, actually, no, at any point in your career, the company you choose matters far more than the role you choose, and certainly more than the title you get or any small discrepancies in the compensation that you're earning. And, I'm not the first to give this advice. This is Sheryl Sandberg's advice about jumping on the rocket ship, but I completely believe in that. And it's worth trusting your instincts. So while I was at the management consulting firm, before I applied to HubSpot, I had seen a Craigslist ad for Airbnb that was called, even the website was different. It was Airbnb at the time. And it was advertising this 15-person company that had happy hours on Fridays and a roof deck, and here's what they were doing. So it was kind of like emphasizing culture, which seems starkly different from management consulting. And I looked at the website and I was like, this just makes so much sense. Why wouldn't you have a much more personal experience when you're traveling? Why wouldn't you automatically make a friend when you're going to a new city? So I wrote them 2 impassioned, basically like love letters / applications that completely went unanswered. But I trusted my instinct in terms of like what company value prop resonated with me and where to bet my career. And that would have been a really good bet. And then my next one was HubSpot. And thank goodness that one got a response back and ended up allowing me to land a role there. And so trust your instincts there. It's like, people say invest in stocks for companies that, where you use the product and you like it anyway. Same goes for where you're thinking about navigating your career.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so valuable. So before we even get to Slack and kind of your role at Slack and what drew you to Slack, I am interested in HubSpot and its culture, because you talk about the culture a lot. So what tangible or what aspects of its culture that really you loved?
Well, you know what? One thing that was great about HubSpot is that before there was a trend to do so, the company was very intentional about actually naming its culture and using culture as a way to drive how the company makes decisions. So Dharmesh, one of the co-founders and the CTO, ended up creating a doc that was called HubSpot's Culture Code. It was inspired by its predecessor. Netflix created something similar. And he actually reached out to me when he was building it and a small handful of other people. And he was really collaborative, which was in part living the culture of HubSpot, and turned it into this living and breathing doc that allowed us to really check ourselves in the ways that we made decisions. So one of the elements of the culture was use good judgment. And it's so simple, but instead of needing like layers and layers of bureaucracy before you make a decision, that was really the guideline that was built into the company's culture. And I think that was really liberating for people for figuring out, what do I do next, or solve for the customer. That's a really simple and straightforward way to guide decision making. And I think at its best, a company that names its culture and uses that to make it very clear which way to go in a decision is a company that's doing that well. And I would say Slack is a perfect example of that too.
Yeah. So, okay, great segue to Slack. So what drew you to Slack? How did you what stage did you join it as well? Because now it's grown to a much bigger company.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I feel so lucky. First of all, that I get to work at Slack and that I joined at the time that I did, although I think now is a really good time to join too. What drew me to Slack was it was almost the inverse of what I had experienced at HubSpot. So HubSpot had this sales and marketing machine down pat, and over time developed a product that caught up and was able to serve its customers. But it had tremendous mind share. Like its blog was just showing up number one, no matter what question you would Google about marketing tips. And yet we had just captured a teeny tiny part of the market share. And so we were transitioning from like a very top-down sales process into over time one that leveraged a freemium model in my final year when I was in product. And just looking at what companies were in high growth and I think represent the future of how software will be built and sold. I looked at all of these freemium SaaS companies. I looked at Dropbox, I looked at Zoom, I looked at Evernote, etc. And Slack to me was at the forefront of a consumerized enterprise company, meaning like it felt very consumer style in terms of how it's built. You can use it for, playful consumer style use cases. I don't know if you guys use it in Stanford undergrad, but like in business school, for example, we used it to coordinate rides from the airport back onto campus. Just silly little things like that. But the business model is squarely enterprise, meaning there's no question about whether over time they would need a sales org to help navigate the buying cycle for certain companies. So I wanted to build my expertise in bottoms-up sales rather than just top-down, because I think the future will require a combination of the two, and I didn't want to become a dinosaur. And also I think, gone are the days where sales gets to pound its chest and claim credit for all the revenue driven by a company. I think sales leaders need to be much more humble today and acknowledge that if you're at an amazing company, the product is doing the vast majority of the selling. You are just kind of shepherding it into the right people's hands. You're bringing the right people around the table. You are answering some security or legal questions. But like you really need to be able to defer to product, and you need to constantly be providing feedback over to the product team so that they can in turn learn from the front lines and improve the self-service experience more.
Yeah.
So Slack was the perfect place to be able to do that. And we were really late stage in terms of product market fit when I joined, but we were really early stage in terms of building out the go-to-market muscle. So it was perfect. Like I could do the creative building stuff, but it was relatively de-risked from product market fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like a very exciting time, especially for someone like you in sales, and also you can use that creativity side. So I'm wondering, so first, how many people in your team that you lead?
Sure. I have a team of about 80. And we're spread across 5 different geographies, actually more now during COVID, as people retreat to, their family homes in Florida and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And that's been a really new challenge for me in terms of widespread remote management, which has been really interesting and really fulfilling, frankly. But yeah, we have, I oversee the mid-market and SMB sales org, which is basically like the commercial sales practice, and a good chunk of our self-service revenue as well.
So I'm wondering, how did you develop your leadership style? Like, how did you know how to be an effective leader, and what tools do you use to kind of ensure that you are being an effective leader for so many different people?
I think it's a work in progress. I don't know if my leadership style is fully baked. I'm a work in progress, and I'm evolving as I see people who I admire, who I want to mimic in different scenarios. So I think the best way to operate as a leader is, through the golden rule, in part. And I've paid close attention to when do I feel most motivated in my role and what makes me want to over deliver. And I try to exude that in my leadership style. I also really believe in this concept of radical candor, which I'm sure you've heard about. But I think there's 2 parts of that. One is developing a relationship with the people who report to me that makes it really clear that I am truly rooting for them and that I have their best interest at heart. And I think that takes time and curiosity and follow through.
Yeah.
And once that's been established, I think constant and really clear, direct communication, especially when we're having hard conversations, like not shying away from hard conversations, has been an important and I hope hallmark part of my leadership style, so that people who work with me feel like they've never grown more in their careers than when we're working together. Like that to me would be a really great sign of success. If someone says, Dannie was a very caring and a very tough leader, I would love to see the combo of those 2 or hear the combo of those 2.
Yeah, I like that. And so, okay, this is kind of off topic, but I'm very interested in it in terms of sales. So I took this class. It was entrepreneurial decision making in terms of principles and values. And one thing that we talked about specifically in sales, so you could say there's 2 types of cultures. One, in the sense where in the company, one of the most important things is just reaching your quota. And in sales, it's very easy to get wrapped up in the numbers and making sure that you're delivering on your quota and getting it done. Sometimes it's at the expense of your morals or your values at the company, or just ethics in general. So I'm wondering, have you ever seen this, or how do you ensure that you make sure your team is just absolutely making the moral decision, the right decision, but also being the most productive and best deliver at sales?
It's such an insightful question. And I really believe that you will do better in sales if you have black and white boundaries around integrity, period.
Yeah.
So in fact, one of the ways that you can live that as a sales leader is when you hear an account executive propose your premium product, but it's to a customer who doesn't need a particularly sophisticated version of your product. Like when you feel like there's some misalignment, but you could earn more money from that, you ask, why specifically this product? And, how would their business look different if they ended up going 1 tier lower? And being willing to make the sacrifice yourself for short-term revenue and say, I really think the better fit is the lower end product, allows you to lead by example and gives people permission to, in turn, just really follow their instincts and do the right thing by the customer.
Yeah.
And I completely believe in karma, not just in a spiritual way, but, a company is nothing beyond its reputation across customers. And the world is really small, and it is very easy for customers to share info with one another and to understand when they've been upsold. So you really have to trust that taking a short-term loss is always worth the long-term gain. And as you're thinking as a leader about whom to promote and what to create positive reinforcement around more broadly and more publicly across the team, you want to reinforce people who did right by their customer, not people who secured the biggest, fanciest deal, but people who navigated the journey in the most customer-centric way.
Yeah, I think that
I really, really don't believe. I don't believe sales has to be a profession, or really should be a profession at all, where your morals or integrity are compromised at all. If you go back to what we were saying earlier, which is if you're selling something that you think someone would be crazy not to buy, like it is a detriment to their business not to use it, which is how I feel about Slack 100% for every company with knowledge workers under the sun, then you truly have to believe that they're going to unlock more value by paying for it than they would by doing something else. And then it kind of addresses your issue from earlier.
Yeah. I think that's a very important message that you just said. So I think that's great. And okay, 2 more questions before we get to more fun ones. But I've heard that there's definitely a gap in female leaders in sales compared to males. And I'm sure it is closing since previous years. But I am wondering why you think that is, and what can you do to ensure to kind of close that gap?
I don't know why that is. And I do see the gap closing slowly but surely. And I feel really intent on being part of helping close that. Yeah. So if there are any women out there listening or watching who are considering a career in sales, I would love to talk to you about it. I think it plays well to some of the skills that are very naturally nurtured for women. So I'm completely generalizing here, but I know I, as a woman, have been taught to be, a really good listener and to hold back from interrupting from people and to try to connect with where people are and act upon that empathy. And frankly, those are all the traits that serve you really well in sales and over time in management and leadership. So I think it plays really well to women. I think we have fewer chances to face rejection. Historically, the guy asks the girl out. So, if you're a guy and you've asked 6 different girls out over the course of your 20s and you've heard no and you know how to let it roll off your back, well, maybe you're okay with rejection. Yeah. And sales requires a lot of resiliency and comfort with rejection. And so maybe we just have to practice putting ourselves out there and addressing fear of failure and, asking someone out or doing other things where no is a very fair answer, and feeling what it's like to let that roll off our back and seeing how great it is to actually hear a yes when you don't expect it. Yeah. So I think there are plenty of ways that we can practice, and I think seeing more women enter into leadership roles will impact the number of women who enter sales in the first place. Because it's important to be able to visualize someone who looks and acts and behaves like yourself. Yeah. And then it's important for all of us to stick together and help us navigate one another's careers.
Yeah, I think that's such a great, I actually didn't think about that, the difference of boys versus girls, and maybe boys are used to rejection more. Because it's true, I think even when applying to jobs, you see a lot of girls, I've read about this, but a lot of girls, when they see a whole list of skills that they need or requirements and they don't have a couple, they're like, oh, okay, I guess it's not for me. Whereas boys are just like, oh, who knows? Like, we'll see what happens, and I can just learn on the job. But I think there should be that change of mindset almost for females to be like, look, worst case, I get a no. That's kind of how I am when I reach out to these females. I'm just like, why not? Worst case, they don't reply, and I'm like, it's okay. So I think that's very true. Yeah. So I'm wondering.
And
yeah,
that's
go ahead.
my advice to anyone, by the way. Like, let's say you've already kicked off your career and there's a management opening, and you already know the objections that you're going to get, which is you need to have sold X amount first, or you don't quite have enough experience for the management role. My advice to all people who I don't think are strong self-advocates is go for it. Well, the first question is, are you okay with rejection? And over time, I think that they can get comfortable saying, okay, yeah, it wouldn't be so bad if I get rejected.
Yeah.
And then I always say, listen, it's going to be a great use of my time and anyone else on the hiring panel's time to hear you tell your story.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, it's going to set you up better to get the role next time when you really feel ready. So why not do it when, like, even if you're not quite there yet, take the at bat and practice, and everybody wins.
Yeah. So before we finish, I really, really want you to talk about, I know you're a big believer in goal setting, and you've used this in navigating your career path. So yeah, tell me a little bit more about your process in goal setting and what it looks like, and yeah, just in general, just for others to use.
Sure. Yeah, I really believe in goal setting for a number of reasons. I think the data supports that goal setting can play a really important role in your career, and specifically writing down your notes about your goals. So there is, I think there was a study at Harvard Business School that said that 3% of people within a graduating class had written down their goals. And that 3% ended up making more money over the course of a 10-year span than the combination of the remaining 97% of people in that class. And I say this not to emphasize the importance of money and happiness, because I think those two are pretty decoupled, frankly. But it is an indicator that putting something down in writing makes it that much more likely that you are going to achieve it. Like, it almost adds a level of personal accountability. And then I think you up that accountability when you find a partner in crime to share it with. And that's actually what ended up inspiring my journey to business school. I had a meeting with an exec coach when I was at HubSpot, and we were going to do an annual goals review. And I hadn't thought through goals, and I thought maybe business school should be on there. And so I shared that with him, and I wrote it down. And lo and behold, like that's what kicked off my journey to applying to business school. And my goal was not even getting accepted. My goal was to be extremely proud of the effort that I put in to applying, like feeling like I didn't leave anything on the table, because I trusted, there's an element of luck and fate and other things involved there. And I'm so, so grateful for that. So my suggestion would be think short and medium term about what your goals are. Be open to that being an evolving process. Write down both. You can do that 1 to 2 times a year, and you can pair that with, New Year's or like a particular date or something that bakes in the tradition, and then find someone that you can share it with to make it that much more likely that it'll come to fruition. And if nothing else, you're going to have this amazing this amazing documentation of how you've thought through your personal and your professional life over the course of years, which I think will serve you really well.
Yeah, I think that's great. I agree. A lot of people I've talked to talk about goal setting and how writing them down is that much more important. And it's almost like putting it into the universe. Like, I'm big into just like, once it's out there, then it's even more so you have to be like, okay, these are the steps I need to get there. So I love that. I think it's so valuable.
I took it to a crazy level when I first learned about this.
Yeah.
It was through one of my first bosses and mentors, Pete Caputa at HubSpot, and I painted a full wall within my living room with chalkboard paint, which was trendy at the time. And I wrote down my goals, personal and professional, in chalk on the living room wall, which is like taking it one step too far, frankly. But everyone who walked in my house would basically have this conversation with me about them, and it really held me accountable to achieving a number of those. So, that's one end of the extreme. Writing it down in a moleskin is the other side of it.
Oh my! So did you have it up there for how long?
I had it up. I have a photo of it. And then and I haven't done that since, but I do still put pen to paper.
That's so cool. That's awesome. So, okay, final questions. What is a passion or hobby that you have, Dannie, that's unrelated to your work?
Well, I kind of hinted at this earlier. I'm very passionate about helping people address mental health. So that's where a lot of my volunteer work lies, and that's where we focus any sort of charitable investments. I want to help people think about seeking help as a brag-worthy type of initiative, as opposed to one that involves stigma. So I mentioned an executive coach earlier. I think that's gaining some steam. And I think people, the more sounding boards we have, the more people who hold up mirrors to our faces and make us look internally, as opposed to, blaming any of our circumstances on the external world. The better we show up as colleagues, as partners to our spouses, and as individuals. So I feel really strongly about that. And I try to play that role even informally to anyone in my social world or in my family who craves it.
Yeah, I think that's, and it's even more pertinent today with coronavirus and just having that connection. I think that personal connection is so important. So I love that. I really do. I'm also pretty passionate about mental health and how it's very, very relevant in a lot of industries, which is sad, but it's true. So I think it's great. Okay, well, more on a positive note. What is a fun or weird talent that you have that no one else really knows about? And so I'll go first. So I got a blueberry, and I can throw blueberries into my mouth. Okay? So here we go. Let's see. Okay. There we go.
Bravo!
Thank you.
Did you practice?
I've been practicing all my life. No, I do this at the end of every show. And so far it's been so great. Beginning, I did a little failure rounds, but it's totally fine. And now we're doing well.
See, this is what I mean. You took a bold risk. You put yourself out there. You could have failed, but here you go.
Exactly.
You're ready to fail.
Exactly.
Okay, I have one close to your blueberry one.
Cool.
I was going to say, I think my superpower is my memory, and often that is pointlessly applied. It's not like I've memorized all historical facts and I can get an A+ on every test.
Yeah.
But in terms of my social and more nuanced memory, I have a catalog of everything under the sun there, which I think in sales makes people feel special and remembered and cared for, which is really nice. But my skill, akin to the blueberry, is I think I saw on your wrist you have a rubber band.
Yeah.
Yes. So in my family, there is a sport where someone stands on completely the other side of the room, and you hold up your hand, and I can flick my rubber hairband and hit the target, I would say 9 out of 10 times across a medium-sized room.
Wow.
And I cannot prove that because I'm alone right now. Please take my word for it.
I will. I'll take your word. So
skill.
You must be. Have you ever tried archery or something?
I did do archery at camp. I can't say I was amazing at that. It's the pointer finger and the resistance.
Oh.
Yes.
Yeah. I like doing that too. It's good. And actually, the memory thing. I'm weird in terms of memory. I know people's birthday that I haven't even friends of mine since I was 5 years old. I know their birthday. It's very weird. Once they say it to me once, I have it in my mind. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I just had a friend from elementary school text me saying, it's April 24th. Whose birthday is it today? So I'm totally right there with you. Yeah. My husband thinks I'm wasting space in my brain that could be used for something more productive.
Yeah.
But I think it is very helpful and comes out in unexpectedly delightful ways.
Very useful.
I feel the same.
Yeah, I do, for sure. Well, Dannie, I just have to say it's been so fun and I've learned a lot, and it's so great to have a leader in sales, because I haven't talked to someone in sales. So it's been very interesting, and Yeah, just thank you so much for coming on the show. I've loved it.